we ran an event on March 7, which was yesterday. But I will go ahead and just continue with that event that we created previously. If you remember correctly, Dakota took you through last night everything basically from start to finish in race management, your entries, races, lineups and results, all those types of things. So I appreciate him doing that in my stead, basically. But today we're going to take a look at the points tab and the pay tab and those types of things. So we'll start up here in the settings area, the settings in the upper right. When you go to add a points and pay group, you're working off of a scheme that you might have created earlier. So I'm going to jump into points and pay schemes, and we can look at creating one of those. So there's 3 different types of schemes. There's championship points, there's lineup points, and there's payouts. Lineup points, we're going to not really pay attention to here. Lineup points is for something that like passing points. If you're running a passing point structure, or you're using passing points from the heat races to line up the feature, then you can worry about a lineup point scheme to calculate those passing points. We're not going to focus on that today. We're going to look at our championship points, and we're going to look at pay schemes. So I'll start with championship points. When you go to add a scheme, a couple of different options. Again, championship lineup payout. There's also a global sanction scheme, which all of our, or not all, but many of our sanctioning bodies have their own specific and unique championship schemes. We do have one built in here for the NASCAR points structures. So if you want to use the NASCAR point scheme for your own track points, you can, but there's no requirement or rule forcing you to. You have, the freedom to add your point schemes as you see fit. As we go through this, I'll just mention in that same chat window where you said where you were from, if a question comes up, you can type it in there. Dakota will monitor the chat and he'll answer the question as it comes up. Or if you want to, you can save them for the end as well. But just to be distinctly clear, you don't have to do anything to calculate the NASCAR points at all. NASCAR points are done. You put in your lineups, you put in the results. The NASCAR points are calculated on their sanction management system that they log into automatically based off of that. The only thing you have to worry about calculating is your own track points and your own track payouts. So you don't have to use the NASCAR scheme. And if you want to use something else, you can add a custom one. I created a custom one earlier today, so we'll take a look at that. A custom scheme, and let me actually just kind of reset all of this. A custom scheme will consist of a couple of different things. First and foremost, at the very top of the screen, you can start to put in your show-up points, and you can start to put in your DNS points. So how many points does a driver get just for showing up, whether that's 0 or you have some kind of show-up point structure. And then if a driver shows up but does DNSs in every race that they're entered in, okay, how many points do they get in that case if they're an all DNS car? So 2 things that you can set there. A lot of tracks just leave those at 0s. You can do whatever you want. And then there are breakdowns as well. Breakdowns basically are races, types of races that you're going to run. So in this scheme, I added an A feature and I added a qualifying breakdown. So inside of these breakdowns, you'll be able to set, and I'll go in the left column first. Some folks have it to where a competitor receiving points in that type of race will not receive show-up points. So show-up points are if you're in the entry list, but as soon as you enter or you actually get put into a race, you can remove those. Passing points exist here as well. Some folks will have extra points that they give in their championship scheme if you pass cars or take away points if you lose a position. The result modifiers are in here for customizing options for DNF, DNS, DQ, or black flag. So again, I've got it in here. DQs get no points. DNSs get no points, but DNFs and black flags get full points. You can change that however you'd like. And then there's the class minimums area. If you have to have a minimum number of race cars, if you start to subtract points, if there aren't a certain number of cars, you can start minimum deductions there as well. But the point of these schemes are the position points, right? So when I start to add position points, you can see right now I've got 0 for everybody. Well, I don't want to do that. I'll say that in the top 10 in my A feature, we'll start at 100 points. We'll decrease by 5, we'll say. And I'll add those. And now I've got 1 through 10, starting at 100, decreasing by 5, 11 plus gets nothing. Okay, now if I want to do the next 10 cars, I will, 10 cars again, start at 50, and now we're going to decrease by 3 instead of 5. Add those. Okay, now I'm decreasing by 3 the rest of the way down. 21 plus gets 0. So you can start to build in your point structure that way. And then all these boxes are customizable. So if you're -5 the whole way, but your winner actually gets a 10-point bump over second, you can just type 110 in there if you can type correctly and save and go that way. Dakota?
Hey, Austin, I think I missed something you said that pertains to what Terry from Rockford there is asking about in the chat.
Okay.
Terry, if you've got a microphone, could you possibly jump in for a second and just ask the question you're looking for there?
Yeah.
Show up points.
He's got that small box up there that says show up points. That you check that box. Competitors receiving points in the race will not receive show up points. Do we need to worry about that if we put 0 in for show up points?
No, because then they're just not going to receive the 0. It really wouldn't matter.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. Perfect. So I'll add a breakdown for qualifying too, just so we've got all that stuff here. I'll say in qualifying, only my top 5 are going to get points. It's going to start at 10. It's going to decrease by 2. Add that. So that's basically what you're doing, is creating what your point structure is going to look like, so that when you add points at the end of a race night, basically you've got the foundation of what you need. There is an option here as well for exclude transfers. I've got it, I've got a qualifying breakdown and an A feature, so I can exclude transfers to A feature. Really wouldn't come up in that situation. But if you're running like a B main and you're going to transfer 4 out of your B to the A main, you could exclude transfers in this view. So your top 4 wouldn't get B main points because they're going to go to the A. And then these positions would just basically start at your first non-transfer. So in that example, 5th. 5th would get the 10, 6th would get the 8, so on and so forth. So that can come into handy if you're running B mains, or even if you're running like heat races that don't have everybody transfer to the feature event, something like that. So that's basically creating a points scheme here. So we'll jump down, and I hit the wrong button there. We'll jump down and we'll go to our pay schemes next. And what you'll see is that pay schemes are exactly the same. I mean, exactly the same, but we're working in dollar amounts instead of point figures. So instead of show up points, we're working with show up pay. Instead of position points, we're working with position pay, those types of things. So it's the same, but it's the same interface. You're just working in dollar amounts instead of points. And again, just to reiterate, you don't have to do anything to calculate NASCAR points. NASCAR points will be calculated automatically for the sanctioning body based off of your lineups and results. So I've got my points breakdowns there. Now I can come here to, and let's make sure that on 3.6 there is some kind of results that I can use. Dakota, what did you do last night? What event did you use to put the race management stuff in?
3:12, if I'm not mistaken, but I actually started points last night, so I apologize.
You're killing me. Cool. Well, let me just throw in 10 random cars, and then I will throw in random lineups and results, and I'll do that as fast as I can. And 10. Perfect. So I suppose I have to have a qualifying and an A feature. And if you want to put stuff in as fast as you can, here's how you can do it. And then I'll calculate my qualifying lineups, and I'll say that they went and finished like this. And then I'll put in my feature lineups. And I'll say that they don't have any transfers. Golly. I said the other day, the number one thing that people forget is the transfers. Look what I forgot. A feature from qualifying. Now I've got an A feature. And so that was the fastest race of all time. There we go. Races are done. Save is completed. We're good. So now when I go to do the points and pay, now when I add a points and pay group, a couple of options show up. One, to name your points groups. I've always named every points group I've ever created point group 1. I don't have any reason for that. It just doesn't matter, but you have to have a name. And And then you can add your schemes. I created a scheme for Sport Compacts. I created a point scheme for just this webinar test. So you basically choose from all the schemes that you've created and for points and pay. Below that, there's a schedules option where you can choose one or multiple schedules that you want that points calculation to be a part of. Remember when we went through season management, you could have multiple schedules. That's where you pick what schedule you want it to be a part of. And then if your points are applying to competitors, owners, or teams, check the box there. On the right side of the screen, we're getting into our eligibilities. So remember, you can do a license check for your track. If you want to do a license check, you can select who's eligible. If they have a license or a temporary license, you can mark that. We did not have a license check, so we're just going to manually select it. And then you can also manually select if somebody's ineligible to receive points or pay for whatever reason. Check the boxes. But really, once you have the schemes in, we'll add. And now my points and pay are calculated. So that means in the app, within the half hour, the points will be out there. That means on the public profile at myracepass.com, within the half hour, the points will be out there. That means if you do a website through us, within the half hour, the points will be updated automatically on the website. That goes for season management as well. If you have a website through us, putting in your schedule so you can score the races in race management will automatically update the website also. And then when you run a race and put in the results, it will automatically update the results area of your schedule page as well. So we're not going to talk a lot about websites today. Websites we'll talk about more tomorrow. But be aware that your schedule, results, and points, which are the three probably most labor-intensive parts of the website, can be automated if you have a website through us. So I've got my points in here. I've got my pay in here. We're good. Points and pay. What if you have to do a manual adjustment? What if there's something in the scheme that didn't cover an event that happened at the track? We'll say he got docked 10 points for disciplinary or whatever. I'll put in a -10 here, and then you can manually adjust that. Or he got a $50 bonus for passing the most cars. Okay, I'll put in $50 there, and you can manually adjust that. And you can do that for every type of race that you run. Features, qualifying, show up. There's a manual adjustment for you there if necessary. So you can still manually adjust that. But again, if your scheme is correct, the foundational pieces of calculating your points and pay at the end of the night are going to be done basically in 5 seconds with 2 clicks. It really doesn't take much there. You can have a different scheme for different classes. Same thing with pay schemes. You can have a different pay scheme for different classes. If you do points or pay differently on a per class basis, nothing wrong with that at all. So there's a lot of options out there for you. And that really ends it for points. I mean, at that point, you're basically done. You know, I can go to season management, and I can go to the points tab. And where are we at here? I was on Dakota schedule. I was on Sport Compacts. And now these stats are updated for that event. And you can see that 312 is part of that event. So, I mean, it goes pretty smoothly like that. Now, when we get into the pay side of things, a couple of extra steps. It all starts with this Create Payments button. This Create Payments button will push all of the information to what we call our 1099 report, which I'll show you later. And it'll also push you to the Payments tab of Season Management, which if you were in 2 nights ago, I said we'd come back to. Here's the chance to come back to it. This Payments tab will allow you to do a few things. First, you can select how everybody got paid. If everybody got paid via check, if everybody got paid via cash or whatever, you can do that with a drop-down. There's also a default payouts option where you can change them all at once. So if everyone's getting paid in cash, save that as cash, boom. Now when you go to end of year reports to track how everyone got paid, that's accurate. So you can use this for your own personal tracking. A couple of other things you can do in here. One, you can create checks from this screen. So I'll click create checks here. And I put in there that everybody's getting paid in cash. So there's nobody that gets paid checks. So let me change that. Everybody's going to get paid checks. We'll save there. So I'll hit create checks. You can choose the check layout. Banks don't really have a ton of different check layout options anymore. But we'll find something that works best for you, whether it's the DLT 103 or whatever it is. There's a wallet check, 3 per page options. So we'll figure out what works best for you if you want to print checks for My Race Pass. You enter the starting check number, check the box. And then there's a print order, is what it sounds like. Do you want them to be printed in their finishing order by their last name or by their car number? I'll choose by car number, and I'll create. And now the program is printing checks. So it brings you to this preview screen for what the checks are going to look like. I say, you know what? I don't like that. I want to instead do the 3 per page. And I typed that number wrong. Cool. Now I'll try it again, create. Okay, now it's printing 3 per page. So if that's how your checks are formatted, great. That's correct. We'll use the print button in the upper right. Brings you to the print preview screen. Now your checks are printing. You're good to go. All you have to do is sign your checks as they come out of the printer in that case, and they're ready to be handed out to those drivers. Or again, if the car owner is the person who was getting paid that night, it'll print to the car owner as well. So my checks are printed. Next step then is I need to know who signed for their checks. By the way, if you make a mistake printing checks, there's nothing stopping you from creating another batch. And you can actually mark this first batch as voided. So if you're tracking this by check number, you'll be able to see if that check number was voided or was still relevant. But now I can print a report that'll allow for drivers to sign for their checks at the back gate. So I'll use the print report option. Again, I printed 2 checks for everybody because I messed that up. But if the car owner is who's getting paid, the driver's name is listed in parentheses behind that, how much they were owed, the check number, and it leaves white space for them to sign. So sign for their check, boom, you know who's grabbed their check out the payout window at the end of the night. Now, we do have a number of tracks that that mail the checks after the fact, like on Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever, they'll mail them out. So you can actually print mailing labels from this screen. Program will tell you if you have an address on file. How do you get an address on file? Well, you can manually update it in the contact list. We'll show you that tomorrow. Or, much more efficiently for you, have the drivers register. If the drivers filled out the registration, you'll have their address on file. You can print the mailing labels that way. Boom, mailing labels are printed. Stick them to the envelope. Mail the checks when you're ready. There's also an option for export to QuickBooks. So if I use QuickBooks Export, you create the bank account and the expense account in QuickBooks, and then you just match it up to what you want to choose here and download. It downloads a .iif file, which is a file that can only be opened in QuickBooks. So you upload that file into QuickBooks on the desktop version. You can open the file. Boom. Now you can use QuickBooks to track all your financials if you need to, however you want to do that. There's also a race management button here to take you back to that event. But yeah, those are the options in this payments tab. So again, end of the race night, last feature results are in, calculate your points and pay, make the adjustments you need, press create payments, and you're ready to print checks. You can do that on a per class basis. So as you know, your first class, the sport compacts or whatever it is, are done, you can print the checks for those guys, and then you can, go and score the next race or whoever. If you have somebody in the office doing it instead, all of that kind of stuff. We had a question in here. The cash payout sheet look like? Really, it's the same. If you pay in cash and you're stuffing cash in envelopes, you can still print that same report or run that same report. And now instead of check number, I've got another report down here. It's got the cash paid as opposed to the check number. So it's really the same. From there, okay, we've done with all of our races. It's end of year time. Now we have to get ready for our 1099s. I'm going to run a report here that I'll show you. We actually call it the 1099 report, and it will bring you all of the payout data for everybody who ran at your track, whether they're an owner or a competitor, throughout the course of the season. You'll see that there's a heads up area up at the top of the screen. We implemented this recently. If you've got any classes out there that you've calculated points and pay for, but you did not press the create payments button, the program will say, hey, for these 4 classes at these 4 events or whatever it is, I got 4 groups here total, you didn't create payments for these guys. So you have the option to press the create payments button here, refresh the screen, and that data will be added as well. So if you forgot to press create payments tonight because you're not printing checks out of MRP, you can still go back and fix that later on. The only thing I would say is that it's important to do that before the first of the year, or your payments are going to start applying to 2024 instead of 2023. But yeah, in the yearly summary, you can see a breakdown, what everybody made, if they were an owner, if you have their address on file, those types of things. You can actually get a breakdown night by night for every payee. So this one's a car owner. That's what they made every night. That's their total, all that kind of stuff. You can export all of this information. You can print all of this information. And then over here, there's actually a filter to where you can filter it to all payees instead of folks who just made $600 or more. So obviously, just $600 or more of the people you need 1099s for, so it defaults to that. But you can change that however you'd like to. What I do then for 1099s is I use a program called W2Mate. I've got a Help Center article outlining the process of using it, and I'll post that in the chat at the end of this deal. But I will export all of this as an Excel sheet. I will then, in that Excel sheet, apply the social security numbers, like type the social security numbers in for each payee or tax ID number if it applies. And then I will save that and import it into this tax software called W2Mate. In W2Mate, I can then print the 1099s that way. If you go to the tax office, they'll give you blank 1099s. You can print the 1099s that way. You can also export the 1099 data as a PDF, email it to your tax office, and they can print the 1099s. Either way does the same thing. And then it also builds that 1096 form that you need to turn in for your own personal tax information as well. So all that stuff exists here. From there, there's a number of other reports that we'll look at here. I'm not going to go through each one individually. I'll just kind of give you an outline of what's in there. So I go to the entry reports. You can get your transponder list that we mentioned before on a night-by-night basis. You can look at average pill draw, which I didn't bring up in the first session. I should have. You get one guy comes up and says, hey, man, I'm really getting the shaft here. I'm getting the short end on these pill draw numbers. You can actually run an average pill draw report for an entire schedule, and you'll be able to see the average pill draw for each driver. I have to pick a schedule that actually has cars in it. But there you go. So your highest draw was 87, your lowest draw was 2, your average is 43, you've drawn 7 times. So you can start giving them the data and all that kind of stuff. Poor Hank Armstrong drew 100 one night. So there's an average pill draw report. There is, as I keep going down the list for lineups, the 3 same lineup reports that exist in race management, same are up there. There's also a Westhold race manager lineups option if you want to use that to import. That's not a very efficient way to do it, but it is available. In the results area, event results, qualifying results, the media results text file, a hard charger report. This one's interesting as well. It'll show you for every schedule, who's passed the most cars throughout the course of the season. So in my A mains for my sport compacts, this guy, Pepe, has passed 18 cars every night, or combined throughout all the nights. He's my year-long hard charger. Some folks like to track that. As I go down to points, your current points, your points by date, your pay by date, that'll actually show you how much money everybody made on each race night throughout the course of the season. There are a number of point average reports if you need the averages of the last few nights. All that kind of stuff. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff in here. Yearly payout, 1099 report. Again, we showed you. That's probably the most important one. Competitor reports exist here as well. You can see all of their stats per class. If they got DQ'd, so you can track that. And then there's these bypass or temporary license reports. If you do take advantage of what we talked about when we went through season management with the license tracking, where you can track everybody's licenses. And then if they don't have a license, you can mark if they bought a temporary license or if you bypass their membership. Now there's a report that you can show for every night all year long who bypassed membership, who bought a temporary license, just so you can track that type of information. So all that stuff is in these reports areas as well. Ton of reports, a lot of good information in all of them. You can pay attention to that as you see fit. But again, that's really what we wanted to show. We wanted to show the process of points, the process of pay, and then some of the reports that we have, including that 1099 report. I promised that I will put that Help Center article in the chat, so I will do that now. Let me go to mrphelp.com. Let me search 1099s. And there is a video in this article. It's fairly long compared to most of my videos, but it highlights the entire process of getting the information from my race pass and our 1099 report, pushing it to W2Mate, using W2Mate to do all that stuff. Now, W2Mate's just the one that we use as an example. You can use whatever 1099 software you want. There's a ton of them out there, but that's the one that I used as an example. And really, that's what I have to show tonight. Tomorrow we'll look at ticketing features, news, the contact list, and website tools. So we'll, kind of get ready for websites and tickets tomorrow.